we're going to do this one this week. Next week, we'll do the marriage one. I'm doing both of them because they talk to each other. They're both going to focus a lot on love of God. This one is specifically based on the 5 love languages. So terminology that we know. We're speaking the language of man, as the Torah will say. So the thing also I figured, because this is something that a lot of people can relate to, so now I'm going to empower you. Anyway, we're doing the 5 love languages of God specifically. And I was thinking about this. Obviously, it's based on 5 love languages, The Secret of Love That Lasts by Gary Chapman, came out in 1992. But I think about this also because love of God is obviously a massive feature. And that's all great on an intellectual level, but we also need to have it on a practical level. What does it actually look like? So we know that it looks like Torah mitzvos, great. A perspective that we don't always have about Torah mitzvos, especially if we're talking about in this regard with relationships, is that you have 248 positive precepts, positive commandments of thou shalt. And there's 365 prohibitives, thou shalt not. So especially if we're looking at it in this regard, the word mitzvah, we always translate as commandment. And it's actually funny because we call it the 10 commandments and it's Aseres HaDibros. It's not even the same word as mitzvah. Aseres HaDibros means 10 sayings. It doesn't mean commandment, it's 10 sayings. And a mitzvah, we translate as commandment. Mitzvah, one of its sources is the Aramaic word of tafsa, which means attachment. So if you think about it like that, we have 248 ways of attaching to God, connecting to God. Because, my love for God is so much. And now what are you supposed to do with love? You have to act on love. It's not enough for you to just be floating around in your love bubble. Everybody knows it's not good enough, right? That's the other thing, is that there's so much that goes on the microcosm level in our own lives. We all know relationships on different levels. Familiar relationships, spousal relationships, parent-child relationship, friendships. We all have some form of relationship that we're familiar with. So all these things that are saying, God asks of you this, that, whatever, we're actually much more familiar with it than we realize. The difference is that we're a little bit more resistant toward it, but it's not because we actually don't understand how it works. Correct me if I'm wrong, but all the times that people are, God is like a vengeful God, and God says, I'm a vengeful God, is it not usually in regard to idolatry that language is used? That God says, when you turn away from me, then my vengeance, etc. God doesn't say if you murder someone, I'm a vengeful God. God doesn't use that terminology there. He doesn't use that terminology for someone who eats bugs. He doesn't use that terminology there. Like, if you eat the creepy crawlies, I'm a vengeful God and I'm going to come after you. He doesn't use that language there. I think I'm on the correct path with this one. It's usually in regard to idolatry. What's idolatry? Is basically religious adultery. Idolatry is you saying there's another God besides for you. So if anybody in a relationship, someone says you're supposed to have a unique relationship with someone and they go cheat on you, would you not also be vengeful? Will you not be justified in having this feeling of you have betrayed me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We don't like it when God gets all worked up. So we're all like, oh my God, vengeful God, whatever. I'm like, but look at how he's using the terminology. He doesn't use it in regard to kosher, which is also where the misunderstanding comes in. Because I was like, the first time I ate non-kosher, I wasn't zapped by lightning, so I did it again. That's because God does not zap you with lightning for eating treif. And even today, we said this Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time, that God waits until the day a person dies, God waits for him to return. Have you ever met someone who, not in the term of abuse, who can be wronged and wronged and wronged and wronged and wronged, and it's like, anytime you're ready, come back to me? Have you ever met anybody like that? Like, ever?
No, we get taught not to be. First time of you.
Yeah, fool me once, exactly. And we would tell someone that you're right, because how can you live like that? We would tell you not to live like that. Yeah. That's not healthy for a human being, to just be walked over. You are now in an abusive relationship. That's what we would say. You have to learn how to say no, or how to you may not come back or whatever. And God is just, whenever you're ready, I'm here. These ideas, we understand it. So going back to the whole thing with the mitzvos, we've talked about on an intellectual level, getting to a place of love being such a strong love that we're actually going to feel it. But we all know that someone tells you, I love so much, and they don't act on it, your love is not worth that much to me unless you actually act on your love. Yeah. And that means sometimes doing things you don't like to do. And that means sometimes putting me first, etc., etc. You have to act on your love. You got to do something about it. So God gives us, obviously there's a lot of hints and layers in the Torah, but God is very clear about, you love me so much, there's 248 ways that you could attach to me and connect to me. These 248 ways and all their offshoots, etc., as in all the thou shalts, you're using the love, the expression of your love, and you're connecting to me. And even if you don't feel the love is burning so much in your heart at this moment, this is still a moment of connection. We always do stuff that we don't want to do for people that we love. That's part of living. So sometimes I don't feel it so strongly, but I'm going to do it for you because I love you. Now, there's also 365 deal breakers. If you think about it like that. There's 365 ways that God says this jeopardizes the relationship. And let's not pretend like we don't have deal breakers.
There aren't deal breakers.
There aren't deal breakers because God is very patient. And there's some of them that kind of, they strain the relationship. Deal breakers is a little bit of an extreme terminology, but there's 365 ways that jeopardize the relationship. Could, God forbid. We understand in our own way, these are the things that I accept, these are the things that I allow, and these are the things that I don't allow. And if you treat me in a certain way, then we are not in this relationship anymore. Like, we call it a deal breaker, or we call it you've gone too far. You could apologize, repent, come back, I didn't realize, etc. So obviously that's the second part of things. But let's not pretend like we don't have that we don't have our lines that we don't let people cross.
We do.
Now, obviously, part of our life journey is learning how to align because we're separate functioning beings. God made us to be separate functioning beings. We have to learn how to align ourselves, especially the ones that we don't understand and we don't like.
Different with the relationship with a person because there's another person to have a relationship with. When you jeopardize your relationship with God, there's no replacement. There's nowhere else to go. So just say you and I have a little thing going on. There's another you and I.
Well, that's why often people who quote unquote jeopardize their relationship to God will turn to other things to worship, to connect to, I guess you could say. They start believing in other things. Mm-hmm. Think about someone who wants to care about the environment. There's nothing wrong with that. But then you have the environmentalist wackos who are like gluing their hands to the tarmac in front of an airplane. What have you just accomplished? Besides for that, your hand might actually get cut off because you're a moron. Or like, what do you succeed in ruining great works of art by throwing paint on it? What does that do for the environment? It becomes like a religious fanaticism. You have people like, what's it called? Like Great Ocean Project? I think that's what it's called. That they take tons of trash out of the ocean. And they're their own project. They don't glue themselves to anything. They go and they clean up the ocean. That's how you do it. I don't know, maybe some of them are fanatics, but you never saw them stopping traffic, these people. Or like you just had in England, ladies yelling, she's trying to get her baby to the hospital, and these people are just standing there. You love the environment so much, but you hate humans, so like who are you saving the environment for? Good, be a steward of the earth. Pollution is bad. Littering is bad. When you turn to fanaticism, it's become a way of worship for you.
Yeah. Just a hard thing to say. God says, if you love me, these are the 248 ways that you can connect to me. These, however, are the 365 that jeopardize our relationship.
Yeah.
Okay? It's different having a relationship man to man and man to God. Because if I'm jeopardizing my relationship with you, where else am I going to go? It's harsh. Just say.
Yes, but that's also part of it, the fact that God has infinite patience. That's the good thing about working with an infinite God.
See, a human will be offended, but God will accept you.
Every night there's a confession prayer that we say, and we said, oops, whatever, I messed up with it. Every morning we say, God, please don't test me today, because let's be honest about it. Just a mushy, squishy human being. Or finely toned, handsome human being. But whatever, I'm just a human being. We say all these prayers and we still have our hiccups, but God knows what he's dealing with. Let's also not pretend that. And God has an infinite memory, but God is also infinitely patient. And we can mess up, but we mess up. And every Yom Kippur, we're back in chill on our best behavior. Look, I'm fasting today, look. Of course I didn't go to work today. Of course, whatever, we're in our best behavior every Yom Kippur. And God's not like, oh, you did the same thing last year. God doesn't say that. He's like, hey, welcome back. Good to see you. Okay, let's start over. No problem. So now that we have this conception that we're going to look at it in this relationship way, let's take it in the practical, because we know Torah and mitzvos. That's how we connect to God, through Torah and mitzvos. But let's understand how this looks in practical relationship way. First of all, you might recognize this from Tanya. This is originally from King Solomon says this, that kamayim apalam panim kin leva adam ala adam. As the way that water mirrors the face of the face, so does the heart of man to man. The same way that you look in a lake, still lake, or in a water, and it reflects back to you. King Solomon says that's the way the heart of man to man is. And he's not saying that as this nice little euphemistic thing. It's not just a fact, it's the nature of man. That when someone expresses great love to you, you will reciprocate. When someone's being super nice to you, it's hard to be mad at them. The flower companies would all go out of business. So the point is not just, oh, the hearts mirror each other, but it's the nature of us that when someone behaves toward us in a certain way, we behave back to them in like manner. Which is part of what we're going to get to here, is that God shows us love in a certain way, and so we reciprocate that love in a similar manner, using these 5 languages here. That's all we have here also, which, by the way, we'll see it in the next one that we do also. When we say a bracha, and we say Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvotav, usually we say that God has sanctified us with his commandments. But if you remember from the Hanukkah mimer that we did, Kodesh, Kuf, Dalet, Shin, like Kiddush, Kedusha doesn't just mean sanctify, it doesn't just mean holy, it means to set apart. That's why when people get married, it's the man, when he gives the ring to the woman, he says, Hare at mikudeshet li kadas Moshe. So you have been sanctified me according to Moshe, but it's not just you've been sanctified to me, it's you've been separated to me. There's only us, and there's nobody else involved in this relationship now, it's just us. You have been separated. So when God gives us a mitzvah, that it's coming from the same word of betrothal, it's not just we have become holy through the mitzvahs, we have become separated. That we're not like everyone else because of these commandments that we have. Our spiritual mission is the 613 mitzvahs and the 7 rabbinic commandments and all its offshoot. And the rest of the world, their spiritual mission would be the 7 nochad laws with all their offshoots. According to our makeup, that's what we each need to fulfill our purpose. We have multiple phrases where God tells us, Vatam tiyuli mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh eila, and you shall be to me a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. But if you see the word that's used there, kadosh, the holy nation, is you're going to be to me a separate nation. We also have kivana v'acharta, rasanu kidash tamikol amin. Shabbos kat Chabad v'rasan hinchaltanu. We see the word kodesh is used a few times here. For you have chosen us and you have blessed us from among all the nations. You have bequeathed us your holy Shabbat in love and favor. Here it's saying blessed. You have chosen us and blessed us. It means you've made us holy as in you separated us. Shabbos, why do you make Kiddush? We're separating between the weekday and Shabbos. So it's not just Shabbos is holy, yes, but it's also separate. Shabbos itself is considered holy. Why? Because it's separate from the rest of the days of the week. So the point that we're using here is that we're seeing that this language that comes up very frequently is not just a language of holiness, it's a language of separateness. That's how a relationship works. Because if all billion of us are all part of the relationship, then there's not anything special about it. As a nation, we have our own relationship with God, but as individuals, we should have our own relationship with God. Now, the Hebrew word for love, ahava, and love, as we've just kind of gone through, love is the root of the 248 positive mitzvot. True attachment and connection to God, right, the word mitzvah being tafsa, is achieved through fulfilling his will. By the way, that's also, as we've spoken about before, the opposite of love, when we talk about the emotions, the Jewish practice, the opposite of love is fear, yira. And people they don't like the word so much because fear, they think of fear of punishment. Especially in Hasidic language, we're specifically not referring to fear of punishment. First of all, fear of punishment is self-serving. I don't want to suffer. That's not considered an ideal level of fear. If you're afraid of punishment, you're not afraid of the transgression, you're afraid of the consequence of the transgression. Mm-hmm. And that is self-serving. I don't want to suffer. That is not the fear that we're aiming for. The fear that we're aiming for is fear when we feel small before greatness. That's a higher level. But the other level of fear is that this thing is so precious to me, I don't want to ruin it. What gets us to buy into the 365 deal breakers terminology that we'd actually bother with it is not because I'm so afraid of the lightning zap. That's not why. It's because my love, which is so strong, is now going to lead me to all these attachments. I don't want to mess it up. For the same reason why you're careful when you hold the baby. You don't want to drop the baby, God forbid. Same reason why you're careful with your grandmother's diamond ring, or your new car, or your new paint job on the house. Anything. I don't want to mess it up. That's the kind of fear that we're looking at. So if we could get a relationship that's so precious to us, separate, sanctified, etc., I don't want to mess it up. And God told us how we might mess it up. Why does eating bugs mess up the relationship? We don't know, but that's what God said. Who cares? But God said this messes up the relationship. And that's why we don't do it. It doesn't always have to make sense. We can understand why stealing might mess up a relationship. But eating pig, who cares? God cares. Why? We don't know. Kosher, we don't understand it. The 5 love languages, if you're familiar with them, are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. These are considered the 5 love languages according to Gary Chapman, when whatever letters come after his name. So, words of affirmation, verbal encouragement, praise, appreciation, inspiring quotes, love notes, compliments, basically anything positive in the word format, in different kind of medium. A lot of people talk about, at least if you know someone's love language, it will help the relationship a lot. Because then you'll understand the person's like, I'm doing so much for you. And you're like, no, you're not, because you have 2 different love languages. I never realized how many people were into it. Some people need to hear constant, that's why it's a word of affirmation. They need to hear it. And usually those are people who will tell it to you, because this is how they're expressing their love. I actually spoke to a romance writer about this. It's Christian romance. We were talking about, can you write a romance without writing the word love? And then we started talking about ghost. First they had the movie, then they had the musical. So the whole thing is that she wants him to say, I love you. And he says, ditto. In the musical version of it, there's a whole song that's, how come you never say I love you? And he's like, I say it with my eyes, or when I make you scrambled eggs, or da-da-da-da-da. I don't know if you need to watch the movie because it gets, I did not actually watch it, and I do not plan to actually watch it. I just know it exists. Anyways, I have an article bashing. Everyone's like, oh, like we should go back to Disney. The old Disney, new Disney sucks because it's so woke. And I'm like, the old Disney sold the lie of true love, so why would we go back to that? I have an article. Maybe I'll just publish it on my own website or something because nobody will probably read it. But at least I'll get my anger out of Disney. Okay.
Might just go viral.
Think about it. It's true. Because we've harped so much on love, we forgot about respect. Is it any wonder that people don't respect people anymore? Because respect doesn't build a magic kingdom, does it?
No.
There's no sparkles in respect. It's not cynical. It's not saying there's no such thing as love, but this lie of true love is a lie. That means you don't have to do anything to earn it, to preserve it, to keep it. It's a lie. Yeah. Torah talks about love a lot, but never this word of true love. Who made up true love? The 2 terms together is a lie. If not, how does anybody ever get divorced if there's such a thing as true love? Oh, they never loved each other when they got married? That's not true. People can be married for 20, 30 years and they have kids and everything, and then something happened. I don't know, maybe at the 25th year. So if it's true love, how could you ever get divorced?
Yeah. They fell out of love.
But what is that even supposed to mean? It's a lie. I don't know if I was supposed to overhear it or not. Someone who I know in their relationship, the husband does not always not yell at his wife in public. So, and I'm sure everyone knows someone like that. You just kind of pretend like you don't really hear it or whatever. It's very awkward, obviously. So she was saying something once about, I don't remember exactly what she was saying. Something about you yelling at your wife in public, whatever. My father said, because there's never an excuse for not having respect. So respect, love is an emotion. It waxes and wanes, whatever. You're not feeling so much love for your kid when they're being an idiot sometimes. You do love them, but love is not the forefront. Or even for your spouse, which you guys would know this better than I am. You're not always feeling this bubbly love for someone if they're not behaving normal right now. But respect is not an emotion.
What is it?
Respect is a value.
Yes.
It's something that's above emotion, if anything. I guess you could say it's based in fear, but it's above it. It has to be constant. I was thinking about it, but respect is not an emotion. Maybe someone can think of a good term for it.
Value, yeah.
I think respect is a value, because if I believe in respect and a value is above what I feel, if I believe in respect, then my treatment of others must be constant. That is why if this person, if respect was as valued maybe, then they wouldn't necessarily yell at their wife in public. I don't know for sure. I don't actually know. I only know because my dad said it, so I'm listening to someone smarter than I am and more experienced than I am.
Genius, because when I go to these like bridal showers, baby showers, they give you these books to say, write like something for the couple or this. And people write, you found your true love, but I always say you need to always respect and be kind. Whatever you're going to say to your spouse if you want to have a good marriage. Whatever comes out of your mouth, if it's unkind, you're not respecting the person, and then you're on a slippery slope.
Yep. There's never an excuse for not respecting your spouse.
Yeah.
It's hard. Obviously, it's hard.
Sometimes.
I think it's brilliant. It's never an excuse for not showing respect.
Yes.
Because it's easy to feel disrespectful, but you can't show it.
It's also because respect is not about what you're feeling right now.
It's an interesting concept.
Thinking about it, I realized how much it makes sense. It makes sense to say that respect is more important, which again gets me back to Disney and the lie of true love. But respect doesn't sell songs.
Truth be told, you have to know what respect means.
Yes.
It's easy to say, show respect, but respect for you might mean one thing, respect for you might mean another thing. It's an interesting to ponder.
But because it's a value and not an emotion, you'll be able to find universal points about what respect looks like. So you might differ at a certain point. The bigger thing is not whether something's respectful or not. The bigger thing is someone's like, no, I can handle it, or I don't mind, or whatever. Anyways, why did we say that? Oh, I got sidetracked by Disney. One more thing, once I'm venting about this. If there's such a thing as true love, and everybody has to have their true love, then who are you to ever deny me true love? If true love is this value, this eternal value, then who are you to ever deny what my true love looks like? So if a person wants to marry their dog, how can you stop them? Because it's not just about love. Funny that people who don't believe in God will believe in eternal love. Who's bringing you together? The stars? Isn't the star like a dying object, so the stars brought you together? Are you familiar with Aida?
The stars aligned.
No, but Aida is like every life we live. There's a lot of stories like that. The time traveling stories, like every life we live, we get brought back together. So who do they believe is doing that? The sun? The sun cares about your love life? The moon? The stars that are dead? Who's doing it? It's just ironic. How can you believe in anything that's eternal if you don't believe in God? Anyways, end of rant.
This is what she does.
This is what happens when I daydream too much. So it's better when I have more things to fill my mind with. Back to the love languages. There's going to be a lot of editing in this. Okay. Words of affirmation. We know what words of affirmation look like. So how do we have God? Remember, we have to have the reflection has to occur. Where do we get our words of affirmation from God? The examples that we'll give for each of these, there's many examples. So like you might think of your own, and that's true because all these connections, the mitzvos, etc., they work two ways, and there's multiple examples for each of these. These are just ones that I specified, but these are not the only ones. So we have this verse. This is from Gemara, but we also say it by Pirkei Avos. God speaks about the Jewish people. They are the branch of my planting, the work of my hands in which I take pride. This is a word of affirmation that God is saying about the Jewish people, that these are the work of my hands, that I take pride in them. Very positive messaging that we get from God. And if you look enough through the Torah, you'll see more examples of this. God says it to us, how to reciprocate to him. Here we have one example. Our 248 connections is the mitzvah that we have of Bikurim. That's when they take the first fruits and they go up to the base of Mikdash with the first fruits, give it to the Kohen, we do a whole ceremony with it. This is from the Torah, Parshas Kisava, Book of Devarim. Vasa el Kohen asher yeh bayam mahem v'amarte elav v'gadti hayom la'Hashem elokecha ki vasi el ha'aretz asher nishba Hashem l'fseinu l'sais lanu. This whole thing that you say, you should come to the Kohen who'll be serving those days and say to him, I declare this day to the Lord, your God, as in my God, that I have come to the land the Lord swore to our forefathers to give us. This is the beginning, the introduction to Bikurim, then it goes on that there's more that's said there. Basically, God has blessed me, and that's why I'm bringing these fruits that are, it's a verbal proclamation that's said at Bikurim. The same way God speaks about us in this with pride, right? I'm so proud of you. That'd be a word of affirmation. We say it back in our gratitude in Bikurim. I'm blessed because God has given it, so we're verbalizing it. Which, by the way, that also, on the flip side of it, just goes to show that if we need work in our love of God, talk about so in Tanya again, we always go back to contemplation and think about God. But if we need something that seems a little bit more immediate to us, this is one way to work on our love of God. Speaking positively, words of affirmation about God is a way for us to work on our love of God. Each time you'd say Baruch Hashem or something like that. That'd be a word of affirmation. Thanking God, you're verbalizing the thanks to God. Benching would be words of affirmation. You're saying, thank you, God, for all that you've given me. So it's not just the act, that it's the verbalizing of it. Any bracha that we say would be a word of affirmation for God. So maybe if we need to work on our own, especially if word of affirmation talk to you. But if it doesn't talk to you so much, one way that we can work on this aspect of love of God is through words of affirmation. Speaking about things that God has done. Not just thinking about it, but you can think about it in your own personal life. Different times that you may have noticed the hand of God in your life, or different times that things worked out for you to actually verbalize it.
So like this nice news.
Yes.
Hashem.
Sometimes you don't want to make big deals about things, but sometimes it is about verbalizing the fact. Because if I say it to you, now we're both part of this word of affirmation for God. So it's not just me verbalizing an acknowledgement, but now I'm putting it also into your mind. I'm sharing those affirmation with you. So that could also awaken God within you. Or by the way, it's interesting, you have that story. You know what happened to me once? That was the hand of God that did that. So this is a good way. All of these we could take and do it on the flip side for ourselves. Not just, oh, this is how we show our love, but hey, if my love needs work, this is one way to start. Let's say there's like a story of this guy who goes to his rabbi. I don't remember the exact, I think it's a joke. He's trying to figure out how to get rid of his wife or something. You know, we can't hire him, man. That's bad. We can't do that kind of stuff. So what are we supposed to do? So, okay. If you make a pledge for tzedakah that you don't fulfill it, that God's going to strike you down or whatever. I don't remember the exact like setup of it. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Rabbi, I'm going to give you $10,000. Okay, not paying the pledge. And then nothing happens to his wife. So it's like, what's going on? He's like, the problem is God's not convinced that you love your wife enough. So he's like, well, what am I supposed to do? He's like, you have to start bringing her flowers, start telling her how beautiful she is, etc. So the guy starts doing all these things, and then his wife gets really sick. He goes running to the rabbi. He's like, my wife is so sick. What am I supposed to do? I thought you wanted to get rid of her. No, once he started acting, he's like, actually, maybe I do like her. Actually, no, I'm not so ready to get rid of her. The point is, it works in both ways.
If you do your gratitude every day,
Gratitude,
that is, yes, that is a word of affirmation, just not.
The point is also not just to keep it in our minds, but to also verbalize it. That is one way for us to help work. And obviously, you can use interrelationships. People sometimes need to hear thank you so much for what you've done. They need to hear it sometimes. Even if we're not that person, sometimes you have to say it.
Sometimes if you write a thank you note, it's very
writing a thing, it says love notes, compliments, thank you notes also count. The words are getting out of you. Some people don't like to verbalize, fine, you write it down. But the general idea is using words that leave your thought. This is according to what they say it is. So the love notes, that's the description. Acts of service. Acts of service is not just doing the big things, it's doing the little things. Taking out the garbage before you're asked. Acts of service also includes, according to Gary Chapman and letters that follow his name, showing partnership in things, working with you on things, etc. So how do we have an act of service, which usually unrequested, an act of service from God? So we have the ultimate service. I've descended to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to land flowing with milk and honey. As in God himself took us out of Egypt. Not by a malach, not with an angel, not with a messenger. God himself took us out of Egypt. This example is actually used also in Tanya. When it talks about the reciprocal love, that we have to think about when we were at our lowest point, God himself took us out. That's when it gives the example of like a king who raises up a guy who's sitting, it says that out of dunghill. Like if you have a total bum sitting in trash and the king himself raises him up out of the trash. That's an even bigger deal if the king is the king of all kings, comes and raises, he himself is raising this person up and bringing them close. God did that ultimately for us in Egypt. How do we see it on a daily thing? This we've just been doing in the Maimarim. Every day we have an exodus from Egypt. That every day we can be lifted up from the finite nature of the world when we connect to God, etc. Now, how do we have acts of service that we volunteer to do for God? We have the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs. 613 mitzvahs and the 7 rabbinic commandments. The 7 rabbinic commandments are the ones that we took upon ourselves to help us in safeguarding the Torah and enhancing the service, etc. So these were taken on a little bit later on. Hallel, if you notice on holidays, there's an extra prayer that's added. Great verses of praise that we sing. All the blessings, it's called Berchas Hanenin, all the blessings, not the after blessing. The grace after meals, it's in the Torah. Hashem, you should eat, you should be satisfied, you should thank God. They say that the first paragraph was written by Moshe. Noda, I think, was written by Yeshua, they say, and then different stages added to it throughout the years. And so that's how we ended up with the whole grace after meals. The before blessings were done by the sages. The bracha on lightning, the bracha on a rainbow, the bracha on besamim, the bracha on food. All those other blessings, it's a rabbinic commandment. Washing our hands before eating, mitilat yadayim, that is from the sages. And that was something that they started to commemorate that the way the Kohanim used to wash their hands in the base of Mikdash. The Shabbat Eruv, putting an Eruv around that whole thing with the Eruv, because if not, you wouldn't be able to carry anything outside your house on Shabbos. That was started by the sages. Shabbos candles, that's a rabbinic commandment. Shabbos candles was started, part of it was to bring peace and light into the home. It's part of the purpose of the Shabbat candles. And then Purim and Hanukkah. These are holidays that we enacted because God, great miracles that God did for us. These are a day that we set aside as a festival to God kind of thing, as an act of service on our part. And we have the mitzvahs to go along with it, etc. Good. Okay, so we got through the first 2.
Very interesting, I'll tell you that.
To be continued.